I'm Luke Hopper, member of the Point Blank team, and I'm joined here in the studio by producer, engineer and tutor Anthony Chapman for this week's edition of Friday Forum Live. So for those of you that haven't tuned in before, that don't know about Friday Forum Live, it's basically your chance to ask questions, really, to get involved, see a bit more about what we do here at Point Blank, and to get a kind of bit of behind the scenes look, really. So yeah, Anthony's here to give us a bit of a tutorial, a bit of an insight into drum layering techniques within Ableton Live. I think we're going to be looking at a remix of yours, right?
Yeah, absolutely. This is a remix that I did for a Canadian artist called Miyagi, who is a sort of well-established kind of breakbeat artist. He's also big on the sort of tech side. He does presets for F-Expansion for their synth line, so he contributes a lot in that way as well. Cool. But yeah, I did this a few months ago, and I think there's some sort of useful stuff in it to do with how I'm using drum layering to keep everything sort of like crisp and tidy. Cool.
So yeah, we're going to jump into that in 1 second. Just before that, I have to say that today is Black Friday for those of you in the States. Also, it is something that's kind of getting more and more popular here in the UK. So for today only, for 24 hours, you've got 10% off a selection of online courses. If you head over to pointblankonline.net, and I think, actually, if you head over to the blog, it's probably easier, pointblankonline.net/blog. And just there at the top, you'll see the Black Friday deal. So there's a selection of 3 or 4 courses, I think, where you can get 10% off. Yeah, the Ableton Live production course, the Logic course, and the EMC course as well. So well worth checking out to save a bit of cash. Also, the online music business course is still half price. I think this is the final week on that one as well. And finally, the kind of full range of courses are all due to begin on Monday the 26th of November. So do head over to the website and get enrolling to not miss out. So yeah, that's probably enough waffle from me. I'll hand you over to Anthony for now, and get posting in the chat room, get involved. If you do have any questions, we'll kind of run through them as we go, and we'll kind of put some time at the end as well. So yeah, over to you.
Absolutely. If anybody's got any questions, just fire them off. I'm more than happy to bring whatever expertise I can to it. Yeah. So, so what I've got here is a remix done in Ableton Live for this, as I said, this artist Miyagi, and the kind of vibe here is, got a little bit of a sort of carnival vibe, tiny little bit sort of African flavour on the snare drums and stuff like that, but it is really busy. And the original had a full vocal by MC Chickaboo, which I just took like 2 lines. That's all I've used, because I just wanted to keep it really simple. The original was a good vocal tune, but with this, I just wanted to keep it really simple. So I just want to kind of give you an insight of sort of the guts of the remix and what I've done in terms of the mix down and some of the things that I've used. But what I'm going to focus in on is drum layering, because I know a lot of people hear it talked about and they might think that it sounds a little bit mysterious, like some kind of dark art, you know. But it's actually not. It's quite simple, and it's just something I think in modern productions that is really essential, because everything is so busy and so loud that you need some way of getting your drums to still poke out. So I'm going to show you the way I've done it in this track, but I'm also going to try and show you a couple of little techniques you can use either with factory plugins in Live and free plugins as well. Okay, so let's just have a quick look at this remix here. So as you can see, I'm working in the arrange view, which is generally for stuff like this is where I tend to work. I'll do a little bit of work in the session view, but I'll be in the arrange view pretty quickly. So I'll just give this a little bit of a blast so we can get a vibe of it. So you can sort of already hear those sort of programmed drums. I've really tried to get like a sort of tight, snappy thing going on the kick drum. Some weird delay effects there. I'll show you what's doing that in a bit. But so the intro is fairly sort of spacious, but if we skip on to where the track actually sort of drops, so coming in here, everything kind of lifts up a little bit and there's a lot more percussive sort of action going on.
Okay? Quite a lot going on there. Yeah.
Exactly. It is really busy. It's always like a really difficult balance to strike, that, because you want your track to be rich and exciting as possible, but you want everything to kind of sing and everything to kind of cut through. And I think it's working pretty well here. So if we just like sort of on this this section here, actually let's take it up to this next time it sort of drops, okay? And I'm just going to sort of look at the drums. So this is my sort of, this is the backbone of it. This is this like programmed beat, which I'm just using the drum rack for. Now, you'll see here on the kick and the snare here, I'm running multis. So basically I'm running 2 separate samples on each. Sometimes I'll do it with like 3 or even 4 if you're really going overboard. But in this case, there's 2 separate samples on each one. And if I pop over into the mixer, if I unpack that drum rack, so if we look, I've got here two kick drums. So that's kind of my deep kick drum. There's still quite a lot of top end information on that, but it is quite round, it's quite a big sort of round one. So if we look at the other one, so that's all I'm doing with that. That is literally all I've got that kick drum there for, is just to give us that snap and that knock. And what I like about this is, because it's on 2 separate faders, we can have real sort of fine control over it. And what you'll actually notice if you look at the mixer, the snappy one I've actually got louder in the mix than the deep one. Now, if we listen to those 2 together, so that's very much a sort of fully sort of rounded thing, okay? And yeah, like I was saying, I really like being able to go in and go, oh well, let's have a bit less snap or a bit more snap, okay? Now it's, so this is kind of what I'm trying to say, is that when a lot of producers sort of talk about this, they kind of make it sound like some kind of dark art, some real mysterious thing, but it's just a case of focusing in on what it is you want out of a channel.
Do you think the actual selection of the sound, the kick drum, it's got to be really important, right? They've got to be suitable for each other. Absolutely,
absolutely. There is a danger. I hear a lot of sort of kick drums and kick drums, I mean, are really the most kind of susceptible to this. I hear a lot of kick drums in sample libraries that are so full and so overcooked, like really compressed, and there's loads of top end, loads of bottom end, loads of mid range. And if you think about it, unless you're making a track that is basically all kick drums and hi-hats, there's no way you're going to be able to get it in.
It's not going to fit in the mix.
Exactly. So you either need to be able to build up a nice library of sounds that are a little bit more controlled, that have got, some little sculpting going on, some scoops, or you need to sort of start thinking about using EQ kind of judiciously, okay? So if we look at the 2 here, so there's 2 slightly different approaches I've got here to these 2 kick drums. On this deep kick drum, I'm using IZotope Alloy. I'll bring this over here. So this is Alloy 1, okay? Now in a minute I'm going to show you Alloy 2, because when I started this remix, only Alloy 1 was out. And by the time I finished it, Alloy 2 was out. So I've actually used a bit of both. I really love Alloy. It's a fantastic channel strip. It offers you really amazing levels of flexibility. Now, as you can see, this EQ is really drastic. A lot of the time, I would look, if I was looking at a student's project, I would look at that and go, "Ooh, what are you doing?" But then I would probably stop and think, well,
it sounds right.
That is the key. You've hit the key there. If it sounds good, it is good. And it's just a matter of listening to it and learning what it is you want out of it. Now, on this kick drum, if you listen to this one on its own, you see this huge scoop here on 3. If I take that out, that's really, really sort of, I don't know, it's kind of, it's just really thick, really right super thick. So, I've really used that to control it. There's also a lot of, in the release, those frequencies get really, really heavy, and it takes up a lot of space in the track. Now, the top end up here, I've kind of boosted it up a lot, but if we bring that down, so it's just kind of, this is kind of, a pretty straight sort of sound. If I bypass that EQ, that's what it was like originally. Okay. Now,
so
even
it was
if
pretty thick, wasn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And the problem I was having was, at the end of that kick drum, it had a sort of release, like, and those frequencies around there, sort of around 160 hertz, were just like flying out.
Yeah.
And it was really sort of causing problems with everything else in the mix. I mean, this is the thing with the kick drum, you know, this is going to underpin everything.
Is that something that you've done kind of afterwards then? Like once you've got some of the arrangement or something down, did you then go back and EQ the kick?
Yeah. It's kind of a two-stage process for me.
Yeah.
I like to mix a little bit as I go along, you know, because it just keeps you interested. It just keeps you interested in the track. But it's
nice to have things sounding good as you go.
Exactly. But I always know that when it comes to the mix down, ideally, obviously we all know time doesn't always allow it, but ideally I would want to get the remix all put together, get it all written basically, then step away from it for at least like a day, come back to it, and come back to it with fresh ears, and then do this next level of sort of mixing. And a lot of the time stuff I would go, let's start again on the kick drum, let's give it you know, hear it in context. But now I've flattened that top end EQ off, if we listen to it with the other one, see, there's loads there. There's absolutely loads of snap there that I can dial in, you know. So on that original kick drum, I can like pull that right back and just concentrate on giving it that little boost in the subs, give it a bit of a scoop there where there was that huge sort of booming sort of frequency, and then just use this second channel here for the snap, you know. And then the great thing you've got there is, we all know, you can get all your drums sounding fantastic, and as soon as you bring in the rest of the track, then everything just starts to sort of disappear and go out of focus. So if that happens on the kick drum in this instance, then we can just bring a bit of that up.
We've got a question actually in the chat room on a very kind of similar thing. You probably kind of got into it. Lee Pickett has asked how he can make his kicks stand out over top of other sounds in the arrangement. He said that he's struggling to keep them sounding clear over the top of everything else. So I guess that's a pretty good
This is a really good technique, is think about trying to get a second kick drum. Like, you know, you often hear producers nowadays say a top kick. You'll put a top kick in, you know. I mean, I know I've seen interviews with a lot of the big kind of commercial sort of electronic producers, and they will often say, oh, this is the top kick, that's really important. Because in a weird sort of way, you can think of these two kicks as for serving two different purposes. Like the big boomy one is the club kick, and it's the you know, the car system with the big sub in kick. But
the head nodding.
Exactly. Kind of, but then you've got to think about how most people are going to hear your music, and a lot of people are going to hear it on little iPod docks and stuff like that. And you really need that snap to kind of to project there as well. I'm not a believer personally in this whole mastered for iTunes thing that's going around at the moment. I don't believe in that. I think it's important to try and find a point where you are happy with the way it sounds and it sounds good, but it kind of works in different contexts. I don't think we should be compromising the way tracks are mixed.
Yeah, definitely.
Saying, oh, I'm going to mix this in a certain way because people are going to listen to it on iTunes. So
and I guess something like this is probably more suited for the club anyway, and it could be the place people hear it. So.
Exactly. But regarding Lee, was it Lee's question?
That's right.
Other things that are really important to look at are sort of the pitch of the kick drums and stuff like that. You've really got to watch out for. If you've got a very bassy track, you've got to kind of try and listen and maybe use an analyzer to see whereabouts in the frequency spectrum the bass end is kind of like singing out of the kick drum, because you can end up where it might be that the bass end on the kick drum and the fundamental bass note of the track are too similar, in which case the kick drum will be difficult to pick out. Sometimes they can be really discordant, and that will just make everything kind of sort of oscillate and just make a big mess. But it's not. Conversely, it's not the right approach to try and pitch your kick drum to the tune of the pitch of the track. Believe me, I tried it. Like when I was younger, I thought, oh, okay, kick drums have a pitch, so if I make it the same pitch as the track, then that will work. But it doesn't. It just makes a huge mess. You know, there isn't really a hard and fast sort of rule. But I'd say in terms of clarity, think about a top kick and think about cuts. Cuts in EQ are usually more important than boosts.
I think that's something we've heard a lot. I think it's always cut where you can rather than boost.
It's definitely and cut first as well. You know, I definitely think rather than reaching for the bass and turning it up, reaching for the top and turning it up. I know that's rich from me considering how much boost I was putting on there. But cuts, like I am I mean, a lot of my students, it's become a bit of a joke in as much as whenever I get an EQ out, they know I'm going to go a bit higher than on this one. I'm going to go up to like about 250 hertz and start cutting it out because I just hate it. It's just something about that frequency. It's really like, you know. But cuts are crucial. That will help. That will really, really help Lee. So. Yeah,
so there you go, Lee. Let's just have a quick look and see if we've got... okay, Eternal Mist has asked about Black Friday deals. You probably locked in slightly late. We did talk about this a little bit earlier. We have got a deal for Black Friday. So for today, 24 hours only, there's 10% off a selection of courses. Unfortunately, I think you mentioned the D&B course. Unfortunately, that one's not in the deal, but there's quite a few good ones. That Ableton production course, the Logic course, also the EMC as well. So let's have a quick look. We've got Saeed, who's asked about EQing drums in progressive and uplifting trance, but okay. I guess it's...
Oh, I think I can tackle that a bit, yeah. That's not my, that's not my, as you can probably hear from this, that's not my kind of style, the music that I make. I mean, but I've worked on tracks like that
surely
before.
It's the techniques are kind of applicable across the board slightly.
Yeah. I think I'm going to take a guess, Saeed, that you're kind of referring to, progressive and uplifting trance. I'm thinking much more sort of pure, very, very sort of slick, electronic kind of sounds.
Clean stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, but the top kick principle and the top snare, as I'll probably sort of show you in a minute as well, both of these can really, really apply there. It's just I think. For Saeed, what I said to Lee kind of applies as well. Think about the EQ, think about cuts, think about the clarity of the drums. In music like in sort of trance, very clean, sort of clinical trance. I say clinical, that sounds bad, but you know what I mean? Those kind of very, very controlled, music like that sounds super, super lush. If you play that on a big rig in a club, it's going to sound amazing. The big rich bass and lovely sort of highs.
Big strings.
Exactly. Yeah. It's going to be a case of, I think really it's going to be the bottom and the top are going to be crucial because you're going to want some boom at the bottom, but you're also going to want the snap at the top to cut through. Yeah. So that and I think as you were saying before as well, your choice of sounds as well is going to be crucial. So, but I think Saeed, think about what I was saying to Lee as well. Just look at that snap and think about that and cuts. Think about cuts in EQ because if you cut, you'll be able to turn it up louder. This is the key. So
cool. Well, let's jump back into the remix for now. Keep the questions coming, guys, and we will try and get through them all. But yeah, let's jump back into this for a while, and I will keep these coming in.
No problem. So that's the sort of kick drum there. Now, if we just have a look at the snare, I've used a similar sort of approach with the snare, but obviously it's quite a different kind of sound. So if I just solo the two snares, so again, we've got two different snare sounds running on the drum rack here in a multi, you see there. So, and obviously to do that, I'm sure you know this, but just, I've added a sample on a different key and then changed the receive note. So you can see there we've got the two kicks on C1, and then here we've got the two snares on D1. So it's a very, very useful thing just to be able to like stack up drums and use the different drums for different purposes, as I was showing you with the kick there. So if we look at the two snares, so that's the two of them together. We'll just listen to the first one. So you can hear this is quite a sort of a thick sounding snare, okay? It's kind of got a bit of beef to it down the bottom end, although as you can see, I've done quite a drastic sort of shelf off down low, but it's only really stuff below about 90 hertz, which really isn't stuff that's going to be useful on the snare drum. And I'm compressing it a little bit. Now I don't always compress individual drum hits when I'm dealing with samples, because usually if stuff's come from a sample library, that's going to be already heavily compressed and processed anyway. So, and now over on the right here, I've got this plugin, Bittersweet, okay? Now I wanted to show you this because this is a free plugin. So everything I've done here in this initial snare chain is either with factory plugins or a free plugin. So you can get this from Flux, and basically this is a transient designer for affecting the transient of the drum. So the initial hit of the drum, the crack, and it's as simple as if you turn it clockwise, it snaps more, and if you turn it anti-clockwise, it snaps less, okay? So this is, you know, there are a lot of other plugins that will do similar things in a more sophisticated way, but Bittersweet is a brilliant way of doing it for free. It's absolutely fantastic. So initially I had that up there, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this back a bit. I'm going to reduce the snap on it, okay? And that's because in my other snare channel, I've got a much snappier sort of snare going on. So I'm going to get rid of that. So as you can hear, obviously that is really, really different. It's actually an 808 sample, an 808 snare sample, but not even really a normal 808 snare sample. It's quite drastically sort of processed already. And then on this one, I'm using Alloy 2. So before we had Alloy 1 running. On this one I'm using Alloy 2. So Alloy 2 has pretty much all of the same features as the first one and some new ones. But really what I wanted to show you here, well, we can see the EQ there is about as brutal as you can get on the bottom end. I've just like banned it, you know, like everything sort of below, what's that, about 325 hertz, something like that.
Steep
It's
cut,
just gone, yeah, it's gone. But the high pass filter in flat on this is great, you know, it's like, it's really clean, you know, it's really, really clean. And that's just because, you know, this is a very surgical job that I'm doing.
Yeah.
All I want is snap. All I want is snap. Then also, we have this transient module in Alloy, and this basically is doing the same as Bittersweet, the thing that I just showed. So this attack value here, if I turn that up, that just really makes it start to snap, okay? And you see on the display up here, it shows you the effect that it's having on that transient. But what you get in Alloy as well is you can do the sustain as well. So you can make the portion after the hit louder or quieter as well. Yeah. But really, where it really comes into its own is if I put it on multi-band. So this is basically 3 different transient processors, one for the low frequencies, one for the mid, and one for the high. And so with this, you can totally focus in on that one frequency. You can also change the crossover points of these as well. Okay. So you can completely go in and surgically like find exactly what it is you want.
So if you just want the top end of that sound to have a bit more.
So you can enhance the top end but leave everything else untouched, or vice versa. So this is really, really useful. Yeah. So if we listen to the two of them together. Okay, so it's, on the snare, it's a little bit more subtle than the kick, but it is just that initial, if I take it out, so it's a really important part. Now when we listen to the sort of the kick and the snare together, you know, they sound good, they're sort of, they sound good, they're really sort of bouncy, but they kind of sound quite bright and sort of, you know, present. But then if we put them in the context of the mix, then... And what I've got here is with these channels, I can really control using those snappy channels to make sure we're still getting plenty of definition there, okay? So, yeah, so that's kind of the layering techniques I'm using on the kick and the snare. I don't know if you've got any...
that's quite helpful as well, because if you've got that kind of control of just that snappy channel, as you go, you can constantly make it sound, keep it on
and you
track.
Can automate it as well. Yeah. So, you know, if you want, you can just like pull that down in different parts of the track. Because I have done remixes and original tracks before where you get to a big breakdown and all of a sudden the top kick or the top snare start to sound a little bit out of place, a little bit inappropriate, and you just push them down a bit, and it's fine, or turn them off, you know. So yeah,
it's wicked. So it's good to have that kind of control. We'll have a quick look.
Was there a question about parallel compression?
There was, there was a parallel. Let's have a look. Parallel compression.
We engineers love talking about parallel compression. Yeah, it's one of our favourite.
So
things.
RAD Prod has asked, when is parallel compression on the kick drum best used?
On the kick drum, okay. It's a tough one to say because it really depends what kind of sample you're using, what kind of parts you're using. If you've got a very heavily processed kick drum sample and the part in the track is not so dynamic, parallel compression isn't necessarily going to bring a huge amount to it. It kind of depends how rich and how much space there is, sort of how much space there is in the sample itself. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. To be honest, parallel compression for me, I normally use it across like groups.
Yeah.
So I'd use it across either all of the drums, or maybe I would do all of the drums except the kick, or I would keep the kick and the snare out, and then everything else, so all the other program drums and any loops or anything like that, I would use parallel compression.
And just run through, for those that don't know, the kind of benefits of parallel compression. So parallel compression, for those that don't know, what we're talking about is basically splitting a channel into two, and one split will have heavy compression on it, and the other split will have little or no compression on it. And the idea behind it is to kind of balance the two characteristics, so the really vital, really compressed sound, really sort of exciting, but then using the drier signal to maintain transients and stuff like that. Because obviously, as we all know, I'll demonstrate this in a second, as we all know, when you really start to squash stuff, you start to lose the transients, especially if it's quite fast compression. So with parallel compression, it is possible to get the best of both worlds. And you're just keeping a balance between
Exactly. And I mean, it's something that I use if I'm mixing like live drums. I almost always use parallel compression because it really makes it sound exciting. And if you get a quiet section, that breathes as well really nicely, you know. But in terms of using it on the kick drum, it's kind of a judgment call, really.
Yeah.
If you've got a kick drum sound that's rich and dynamic enough, maybe one that has a long decay and maybe a lot of air on it, then perhaps it would be worth trying then. I mean, you know, remember with parallel compression, you can try it out in a lot of plugins that have a dry and wet balance. So if you've got like a compressor or a limiter that has a dry and wet balance, you can just, if you put that to 50% dry, that's basically parallel compression or limiting. You're getting the same thing, You just don't have the fine control over the two elements of it. It's very easy to do in Live. It's very easy to do in Pro Tools and Logic. You know, it's but for an individual channel, it's really a judgment call. You know, but try it on, group all of your drums and try it on them because it sounds phenomenal. Yeah,
I think we've also, we might have done a Friday Forum and gone through parallel compression before, so it's definitely worth going through the YouTube channel. I'm pretty sure that JC has done one in the past, so yeah, go through the YouTube channel, and I'm sure in one of the mixing sessions that we did, you'll probably be able to find out you know, a bit more about parallel compression. So yeah, let's have a quick look in the chat room and see if we've got anything else. Someone's asked rather enthusiastically about creating a very warm kick like Swedish House Mafia. That's from The Influence. I guess that's kind of what we talked about, choice of
well, funnily enough, when I said I saw an interview with producers talking about top kick, it was Swedish House Mafia.
Ah, there you go.
I think it was, it was on YouTube. Okay. It wasn't Point Blank, but I can't remember who it was who had the interview up there. And it just seemed to me, listening to them, they were basically breaking down one of their singles. And it was just kind of what I was talking about, finding the two channels that contrast really nicely and give you control over the bottom end and the top end, the snap. But their sounds that they're using are very much sort of synthetic kind of sounds. You know, they kind of sound like drum synth sort of sounds. Obviously, with this, I'm coming from a kind of a breakbeat.
I think the vibe of the track is a bit more natural, a bit more kind of.
I mean, I'm not doing. I'd never do Swedish House Mafia or anybody down. You know. You know. I mean, this is the thing. I'm an artist, but I'm also a professional. You know, and I'm tutoring and stuff like that. So I kind of have to learn a bit about everything. You know? And but you know, so the drum sounds I'm using here are a lot more kind of obviously sampley. You know, the samples I'm using will probably have been built up from a few different layers. But listening to their productions, it sounds a bit more like
synthesized.
Very much sort of straight. not straight, sort of pure, sort of synthy kind of kick drum sounds. I mean, you know, maybe even going back to the original sort of 909 sounds, very pure, and then sort of EQing them and compressing them really nicely. But in that interview that I saw, very definitely, they used exactly the same technique. I was using the kick drum, which was just, you know, have a dedicated, I mean, I'm sure in the interview they actually said, I'm not going to do a Swedish accent, but they said, you know, the top kick is crucial, it's the most important thing. You know, that's what they were saying. So experiment with getting a separate channel up, copy your MIDI over, or depending on what you're using, get the MIDI to send to, you know, 2 different devices at the same time, and then just put another track up and just experiment getting like that really nice snap. With the bottom end part of it, you're saying about something really warm, you've just got to be so careful. It's very tempting to just get that bottom end and crank it up. But you've always need to look at what's going on. Everything, pretty much everything below 50 hertz is kind of useless. You know, it's not really doing a useful job other than taking up space in the mix.
Muddying stuff up,
So I almost always, you know, if it's a real boomy sort of sound, I will shelf off a little bit down below, and you just find that makes so much more room for everything else. And in a weird sort of way, it can kind of make it sound warmer. And like, as I was saying before, when you cut, you can sort of turn it up. So you know, so I'd experiment with some things like that.
Definitely. And obviously, this session will be archived pretty much instantly after this, so you can always go back and, you know, kind of go through the technique again to do at home. Let's have a quick look. I think that might be it for now, but let's have a look. Okay, we've got a question from Eternal Mist, who said that they make D&B, where the kicks usually sit between 90 and 110. With techno, where would your kick sit and the bass?
90 and 110. What would they be referring to?
Hertz, I guess.
Oh yeah. Sorry, you didn't have hertz on there. I was like, I was D&B at 90 to 110 BPM. That's interesting. Sorry. It all depends on what else is going to be going on in the track. Okay, so if obviously this remix, this is kind of bass music. So the bass sound is going to be a huge part of it. But in techno, it's not necessarily.
You might have a more booming kick.
The kick might be kind of providing the bass. You know, I mean, you think of those classic sort of techno sounds where you've got that huge, wide, lots of big low end on the kick drum, big snap at the top. But then the bass line is actually quite a bit higher up, it's quite melodic. So you really need to experiment. I mean, 90 to 110 hertz. That's, you know, that's kind of what I always think of as like the business end. That's like, you know, where all the big stuff goes on in the kick drum. But you perhaps, you know, I was just saying before about rolling off down low. Perhaps, you know, if you've got space in a techno track, roll it off less down below and get that real big lush thing going on. But you've just got to watch out for what else is going on, you know. And again, like if it's very tonal, if the kick drum is very tonal, you just got to watch out for sort of big discordant kind of, you know, modulation going on when they're happening together. So
I guess it's about you know, making sure the sounds work together and referencing them, I guess. And
but play around, you know, sort of 70, 80. 80 is still, you know, that's still quite a good kind of booming sort of frequency, and experiment with the amount of sort of roll off down low that you use, you know.
Cool. I think that's probably answered. I think that's probably answered a few bits for now. Obviously, keep them coming. We'll jump back into the remix quickly, and we'll keep these going as well.
No problem. Okay, so if we just listen to all of those programmed drums together, okay. So obviously we've got the 2 kicks, the 2 snares doing a lot. Then there's a few other sort of little sounds in there. We've got a bit of a clap going on there. And the hi-hats are kind of a bit broken up, a bit busy. I didn't really want to just go for a sort of straight hi-hat all the way through it, because what I wanted to do was thicken it out a little bit with a loop, okay? And, but when you start bringing a loop in, as I'm sure so many people that are watching this know, they know exactly this feeling, is how do we get the two to work together without ended up with a track that's all loop or a track that's all programmed drums. You know, it's very, very difficult to do. I know that in the 90s, when technology was very, very different, and I was using hardware samplers and Ataris, Cubase and stuff like that, we struggled. We really, really struggled to get them to work together because sometimes you'd be in a studio and you'd only have like 4 channels of compression, and you'd have EQ on the desk to play with. You might not even have enough channels on the desk for everything. So for somebody like me, for an old sort like me, having access to this kind of technology is amazing because we can just work and work and work until we find a technique that works. So on this track, I'm using Sidechain just to keep it all under control. Now, we've reached I'm using Sidechain in the way Sidechain was originally designed, as a kind of controlling device. People used to use Sidechain on hardware compressors to DS.
That's right, yeah.
They've
spoken about that before.
So, nowadays we think of Sidechain as being a very obvious sort of sonic effect, that kind of pump on a pad. But Sidechain originally was purely for control, and it was for kind of focusing in the compressor on a certain frequency. So what I've done here is it's kind of midway between the two. I'm using Sidechain to pump the loop slightly, just to make room for the programmed drums. Okay. Now there's a few different sort of ways you can do this. Obviously, because we're in Ableton Live, we're really lucky, and it's kind of built in from the ground up. So if I just bring this, if we have a listen to the loop first. So it's a fairly straight kind of loop.
Quite a lot going on though.
Exactly, yeah. And I mean, the thing about using a loop with programmed drums is a lot of the time what you're really wanting is the space between the hits.
Yeah.
You want that ambience, you want that air. So if we have a look in the channel, we can just have a look and see what I've done. So again here, fairly drastic EQ on the bottom end because I don't want, I want the bottom end to be handled by the kick drum that I've already got in there. Because there's actually a lot. This loop, I mean, I say this loop is is already been quite heavily processed, and I think that's got a programmed kick drum and snare in it. So I'm kind of like washing that out a bit because what I'm really interested in is the little bit of the hi-hat and then the sort of the air between the hits. Okay. Bit of a boost up there. So
you're trying to make the drums, your kind of drums overall feel a bit more natural by getting this kind of air.
Exactly, yeah. I think there's a sort of interesting thing at play here, which is that if this track had about half as many elements in it, I probably wouldn't need the loop. I would probably just be able to go with the programmed drums. But as you sort of build everything up melodically and pads and other elements, the loop really starts to make sense because it's like, okay, this is gonna keep everything moving really nicely. Okay, so if we look at the compressor here, I'm sidechaining it from the output of the drum rack. Now, that's kind of it's a pretty sort of broad brush that it's kind of, you can focus in on one channel. So I could just sidechain it off the kick drum, or I could, or I know elsewhere I believe elsewhere in the track I've got a I can't see it at the moment, but I know I've got there's a kick drum somewhere. There's a channel with just a kick drum on the quarter beats, which I just use for sidechaining something else. You don't hear it in the mix. It's just used as a trigger. But what I've done here is I've set it to the output of the drum rack and filtered that down. So basically it's only the frequencies up to 290 hertz that are triggering off the sidechain, okay? So if I run this, so that's what's triggering the sidechain, So it's still getting a little bit of the snare, but it's mainly sort of kick drum, and it's ignoring the hi-hats and any sort of higher sort of percussive stuff.
Typically, I think for me personally, when I think of sidechaining, the instant thing that comes to mind is just the kick drum. You don't really think about this technique.
Exactly. The thing is, I tried it with just the kick drum on this, and I just preferred it when I did it with the whole drum rack and then filtered it down. There's no right or wrong way. Again, like I said earlier, and again, my students would just laugh because it's my favourite catchphrase. If it sounds right, it is right. What I'm all about really is showing people the different techniques that you can use to reach that point where you're happy with it, and it's working. So as you can see here, the sidechain is kind of just sort of pushing down the level on that loop a little bit, and what that should mean is that if I bring the both in together, so they kind of work.
You can hear that, you can hear that, can't you?
Yeah, but the snappiness of the program drums is still coming through, you know, and this is something that's really important. I know, you know, it's something that I always used to struggle with doing sort of breakbeat tracks, was like, you wanted the breakbeat, you know, you wanted the actual loop, but you also wanted it to sound tight and focused for the dance floor. And until I started sidechaining stuff here, it was difficult to do. And always I would sort of finish a mix and I would either think, oh, there's too much loop in there, or oh, I can't really hear the loop, you know? So this is a sort of useful way. And of course, this doesn't just apply to loops, this can apply to anything, you know? So yeah.
Cool. We'll have a quick flick through the chat room. Is drum tuning necessary in dance music? That's from Jason Quinn.
Okay. Necessary, as I said before, watch out for going down the route of trying to tune your, like particularly your kick drum to the key of the track, because that is that way madness lies. I'm telling you, I've tried it so many times, and when you start using tonally tuned kick drums, really it needs to be like the whole focus of the track. There's nothing else that can go around it. In terms of, when you say drum tuning, I'm thinking drum tuning like with a drum kit, like the way a drummer will tune a drum kit and they'll pitch all of the different drums. And yeah, that can be valid in dance music as well. Funny enough, on the sound engineering module that I teach, we bring session musicians in, and we did a session with a drummer the other week, and a lot of our students are doing kind of dance music, hip hop, grime, stuff like that, and it is vital for them with the live drums for getting the drums tuned nicely. Luckily, the drummer was absolutely fantastic and showed everybody how he does it, and it sounded fantastic. But with samples, it applies as well, because you know I often find that if you just pitch one or two of the samples down or up a little bit, it can just change the energy of the track completely.
Definitely.
Snares especially. I mean, because they have a lot of sort of mid and high frequency information, it's quite obvious when you start to tune them, when you start to pitch them around. So just watch out for sort of, you know, making stuff too kind of snappy and blippy. But
it's worth experimenting with though,
Definitely, yeah. And it's a good way of making stuff sound quite individual, giving it your own thing. And funny enough, I was talking with some students yesterday saying that we were just talking about kind of modern music, lots of kind of hip hop and grime and R&B and dubstep and stuff like that. And we were just sort of commenting about how anything goes now, like, you know. And in a lot of ways, if you can make something stand out a little bit and be a little bit weird, it will work. And you hear all these tracks with like snare drums pitching up and down and stuff like that. So I think this is a really good thing to.
It's definitely a big thing in hip hop right now. That pitch snares.
Absolutely.
Okay, cool. Let's have a look. We've got a question from Era068 who's asked about putting reverb on drums. If you have any kind of tips for that at all?
Okay. So reverb on drums in dance music is an area that is fraught with danger. Okay, in my opinion. In my opinion. Now, I've got a little bit of reverb going on in this track, but not a huge amount at all, because it's very difficult to get it on the drums at least. In dance music, it's really easy to either have much too much reverb or it's just not there at all, and it's just kind of taking up a bit of space. But I would say a little sort of, not a rule, but a good thing to think about when you're thinking about reverb on drums in dance music is the more space there is in the track, the more space there's going to be for reverb, and the more it's going to work quite nicely. Because if the track's really, really busy already, like this is, you know,
reverb's just going to kind of
just going to mess everything up. And the thing is, that loop has kind of got that hit there kind of sounds a little bit reverby. So I've kind of backed off from that. I am using reverb in this, but it's not really on the drums. It's more on other devices. I'm using the Valhalla Room, which I'm despite having the most kind of basic looking interface ever, this is like my favourite reverb at the moment. It's like a $50 plugin. It's this guy Sean Costello, a one-man operation. He's an absolutely sound guy, and it updates it all the time, and it sounds absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, I think we've come across that one before. Actually,
it's really good. And I'm also using a free. Again, I always like to tell students about sort of free plugins that are really good. If I can find the vocals here, this is from Valhalla, and this is a freebie, the Freak Echo, and this is really cool. So this is basically like a kind of pitch shift echo. Oh, right, okay. And so we're talking about sort of reverb on dance music drums. Sometimes something like this could be a little bit more exciting, you know, using a sort of a weird kind of pitchy kind of echo and doing it really short could be a little bit more exciting than a straight reverb, especially if you've not got much room. But yeah, reverb, like I said, in dance music, the more space you've got in the track, the more space you've got for the reverb. But if you've got a very busy track, I wouldn't really worry too much about it. If you're using lots of loops, I mean, you think about it like 180 BPM kind of nail core drum and bass, you're not really going to get a huge amount of space.
Reverb,
no. So.
Cool, we are reaching slightly towards the end of time, but there's a pretty good question coming from Destination Dub, who's asked tips for gelling drums together. He said that his drum tracks always sound a bit thin and a bit empty.
Okay, well, that's a really good. That almost seems rehearsed. Thank you very much. I can bring you into like a sort of a final element on the drums here. So if I show you, this is the drum rack itself. Okay, so obviously plugins over on the right, if you can see those. These ones outside of the rack, these are across the entirety of the rack, okay? So obviously you can see I've got alloy again going on, and I'm doing even more EQ, and look at me with my, with my top end boost there. But what is really helping gel the drums together here is this plugin, Magnetic, okay? And this is a tape simulator, like tape saturation plugin. I love a bit of tape saturation.
Yeah, it's come up really a lot recently, actually.
Lots of stuff. Yeah. So if I play this, okay, if I just play the program drums, and then I bypass this.
Well, that makes a mess.
So it's a huge, you know, and the thing is, I'm kind of mixing through that as well. So I put that on at a fairly early stage.
Okay.
You know, I didn't leave it till the last minute. I put it on at a quite early stage, and it just helps to gel everything together.
What's the name of the plugin?
This is called Magnetic, and it's by a company called Nomad Factory.
Okay.
There's actually, funnily enough, yet again, there's a new version of that which came out after I did this. So this is like this is version 1, the old one. But also, you know, here on Alloy, I've got a bit of compression going on, but only a tiny amount. See, I've got this is quite fast attack, but only a tiny amount of compression. I guess the more traditional way on the drums bus, on the drum rack there, would be more compression but slower attack, so that you still get the transients coming through. So any kind of techniques like this could set you in good stead. Yeah. Bit of saturation. I saw somebody mention distortion.
Yeah, that's right. Jesse's asked about adding distortion or saturation for getting a crunchy sound. I think he's referring to breakbeats in particular.
Yeah, no, totally. Well, this loop is already kind of pre-processed quite a bit.
It's pretty crunchy, isn't it?
Yeah, it's already pretty crunchy, you know, and that's the kind of thing that you want to go for. And that Magnetic plugin, or pretty much any kind of tape plugin, will give you a bit of that. In live, you've got the overdrive, which works really nicely, and remember parallel processing. There's a wet and dry balance on that overdrive enabling, which can help you as well. So.
Cool. Let's just see if we've got any kind of final bits to run through. Mr. Riccozzi has asked. He said he's seen people mono everything under a certain frequency in a track in order to not make the bass messy. Would you do that, or how would you go about that?
Yeah, okay. That is something that I would do sometimes. That comes from mastering. bass onto vinyl, cutting bass onto vinyl that really is a dark art. But you know, that really is. Yeah. And a lot of engineers. I remember the first time I went.
Is that because it makes the needle jump? Or
yeah, because like bass frequencies make the groove. You know, the bass frequencies make the grooves sort of wobble the most out of everything. Yeah. And trying to sort of encode stereo bass into vinyl is really difficult. Now, bass is also an area where phase problems are really inherent, right, you know. And so, yeah, so if we have a look here, now, when I did a master of this, if I can just find it, the way I do it, unfortunately, is not using a free plugin. I use Ozone. This is actually Ozone 4. This isn't even the latest one. Mm-hmm. Look at me. And in this, we've got the stereo imaging section here. And on that, I'll just pull that down to all the way down there. And that basically is putting all of the bass frequencies in mono, everything from 20 up to 120 hertz. The thing is, bass doesn't carry much stereo information. Yeah, it's very difficult to make something obviously stereo at those low frequencies unless it's really out of phase, which obviously you don't want. That's dangerous. So yeah, I would generally, when I go to master, I mean with this track I did a master of my own so it could be played out before it went for proper mastering. Yeah, so you can. And I did this on that. Yeah. But sometimes if I'm not sure, if I'm a bit worried about the level of mastering it's going to get, I'll do this. You know, I won't do any limiting or anything like that, but I'll just mono the bass end so I know that I don't have to worry about that. It's not going to end up going out to promo with like huge wobbly out of phase bass or something like that.
Which is the last thing you want.
No,
Okay, guys, we are kind of reaching time. We'll just have a quick scan through. Well, I tell you what, to be honest, guys, if you do keep the questions rolling through, what we'll do is, you know, we'll obviously the session will be archived, and we'll try and go through any kind of questions that we didn't get time to answer. And yeah, so keep locked to the YouTube channel for that. Also, just say a big thanks to Anthony for today.
Thank you for having me so much. It's been a real pleasure.
And if you do want to learn a bit more about sound engineering, about the course that Anthony does teach, then head over to pointblanklondon.com where you can check out the full kind of sound engineering course, the diploma, etc., and find out a lot more info. Also, just to say, make sure you guys keep locked to the Facebook page where you can find out all kind of upcoming information on Friday Forum, on the masterclasses as well. So we've got River Star coming in a week, I think, December 5th. Then after that, Eats Everything as well. So definitely keep locked to the Facebook for all Friday Forum and the masterclass stuff as well. And yeah, that's it from us. We'll see you next week at the same time. Thanks for watching.